The Shropshire Yeomanry was a yeomanry regiment of the British Army, first raised in 1795, which served as a cavalry and dismounted infantry regiment in the First World War and as a cavalry and an artillery regiment in the Second World War. It was then amalgamated with the Shropshire Royal Horse Artillery. In 1969, the regiment was replaced by No.4 Squadron, 35 Signal Regiment and the Shropshire Yeomanry Cadre. These later formed the Shropshire Yeomanry Squadron of the Queen's Own Mercian Yeomanry before their amalgamation into the Royal Mercian and Lancastrian Yeomanry. History, formation and early history. The Shropshire Yeomanry dates its origins to the French Wars of 1793 to 1815, when volunteer cavalry units were raised throughout the country. They date their origins to the raising of the Wellington Troop in 1795. Second Boer War. The yeomanry was not intended to serve overseas, but due to the string of defeats during Black Week in December 1899, the British government realized they were going to need more troops than just the regular army. A royal warrant was issued on the 24th of December 1899 to allow volunteer forces to serve in the Second Boer War. The royal warrant asked standing yeomanry regiments to provide service companies of approximately 115 men each for the Imperial Yeomanry. The regiment provided the 13th Company for the 5th Battalion in 1900. First World War. In accordance with the Territorial and Reserve Forces Act 1907, which brought the Territorial Force into being, the TF was intended to be a home defense force for service during wartime, and members could not be compelled to serve outside the country. However, on the outbreak of war on the 4th of August 1914, many members volunteered for Imperial service. Therefore, TF units were split in August and September 1914 into first-line and second-line units. Later, a third line was formed to act as a reserve, providing trained replacements for the first and second-line regiments. 1/1 of a Stone Shropshire Yeomanry. The 1/1 of a Stone Shropshire Yeomanry was mobilised with the Welsh Border Mounted Brigade on the 4th of August 1914 at the outbreak of the First World War. It moved to East Anglia, where it joined the 1st Mounted Division in September 1914. In November 1915, the brigade was dismounted. The regiment was posted with the brigade to Egypt in March 1916. On the 20th of March, Welsh Border Mounted Brigade was absorbed into the 4th Dismounted Brigade. The brigade was with the Suez Canal defences when, on the 14th of January 1917, Egyptian Expeditionary Force Order No. 26 instructed that the 2nd, 3rd and 4th Dismounted Brigades be reorganized as the 229th, 230th and 231st Brigades. Between January and March 1917, the small yeomanry regiments were amalgamated and numbered as battalions of infantry regiments recruiting from the same districts. As a result, the 1/1 of a Stone Shropshire Yeomanry was amalgamated with the 1/1 of a Stone Cheshire Yeomanry at Cairo on the 2nd of March 1917 to form the 10th Battalion, King's Shropshire Light Infantry. On the 23rd of February, the general officer commanding the EEF, Lieutenant General Sir A.J. Murray, sought permission from the War Office to form the 229th, 230th and 231st Brigades into a new division. On the 25th of February, the War Office granted permission and the new 74th Division started to form. The 231st Brigade joined the division at El Arish by the 9th of March. The 10th KSLR remained with 231st Brigade in 74th Division for the rest of the war. It took part in the invasion of Palestine in 1917 and 1918, including the Second and Third Battles of Gaza, including the capture of Beersheba on the 31st of October and the Sharia position on the 6th of November. At the end of 1917, it took part in the capture and defense of Jerusalem, and in March 1918 in the Battle of Tel Assur. On the 3rd of April 1918, the division was warned that it would move to France, and by the 30th of April 1918 had completed embarkation at Alexandria. In May 1918, the battalion landed at Marseille, France with 74th Division. It served in France and Flanders with the division for the rest of the war. By the 18th of May, the division had concentrated around Rouen in the Abbeville area. Here the dismounted yeomanry underwent training for service on the Western Front, particularly trench warfare and gas defense. On the 14th of July 1918, the Yeomanry Division went into the line for the first time, near Merville on the right of 11th Corps. From September 1918, as part of 3rd Corps of 4th Army, it took part in the 100 Days Offensive, including the Second Battle of the Somme and the battles of the Hindenburg Line. In October and November 1918, it took part in the final advance in Artois and Flanders. By the armistice, it was near Tournai, Belgique, still with 74th Division. With the end of the war, the troops of 74th Division were engaged in railway repair work, and education was undertaken while demobilization began. The division and its subformations were disbanded on the 10th of July 1919. 2/1 of a Stone Shropshire Yeomanry. The Second-Line Regiment was formed in 1914 and joined the 2/1 of a Stone Welsh Border Mounted Brigade in the Newcastle area of Northumberland in January 1915. The brigade was placed under the command of the 63rd Division. On the 31st of March 1916, the remaining mounted brigades were ordered to be numbered in a single sequence, and the brigade became 17th Mounted Brigade, still in Northumberland under Northern Command. In April 1916, it moved with its brigade to East Anglia, where it joined the 1st Mounted Division. It replaced its first line, which had departed for Egypt. By July, it had left with its brigade for the Morpeth, Northumberland area. In July 1916, there was a major reorganization of second-line yeomanry units in the United Kingdom. All but 12 regiments were converted to cyclists, and as a consequence the regiment was dismounted and the brigade converted to 10th Cyclist Brigade. Further reorganization in October and November 1916 saw the brigade redesignated as 6th Cyclist Brigade in November, still in the Morpeth area. In March 1917, the regiment moved to Newbiggin and later to Woodhorn near Morpeth. Early in 1918, the brigade moved to Ireland and was stationed at the Curragh. There were no further changes before the end of the war. 3/1 of a Stone Shropshire Yeomanry. The 3rd Line Regiment was formed in 1914 and in the summer of 1915 affiliated to a reserve cavalry regiment in Ireland. In the summer of 1916 it was dismounted and attached to the 3rd Line groups of the West Lancashire Division at Oswestry as its first line was serving as infantry. The regiment was disbanded in early 1917, with personnel transferring to the 2nd Line Regiment or to the 4th Battalion of the King's Shropshire Light Infantry, probably at 10B. Between the wars post-war, a commission was set up to consider the shape of the territorial force. The experience of the First World War made it clear that cavalry was surfeit. The commission decided that only the 14 most senior regiments were to be retained as cavalry. 8 regiments were converted to armoured car companies of the Royal Tank Corps. 1 was reduced to a battery in another regiment. 1 was absorbed into a local infantry battalion. 1 became a signals regiment and 2 were disbanded. The remaining 25 regiments were converted to brigades of the Royal Field Artillery between 1920 and 1922. Is the 6th most senior regiment in the order of precedence. The Shropshire Yeomanry was retained as horse cavalry. Second World War 75th Medium Regiment. On the 1st of September 1939, the Shropshire Yeomanry was a horse cavalry regiment, but, in 1940, the regiment lost its horses and converted to artillery. HQ and A squadrons formed 101 and 102 batteries of the 75th Medium Regiment (RA). On the 20th of December 1942, the regiment, equipped with 4.5 howitzers, left Liverpool for Durban and Suez, arriving on the 14th of April 1943. 101 Battery was re-equipped with 5.5 howitzers, whilst 102 kept its 4.5s. After intensive training, 101 Battery moved through the desert to Tripoli, then went to Syracuse in Sicily and saw its first action. 102 Battery arrived in Sicily from Egypt on the 7th of August. The regiment served through the Italian campaign, sometimes in support of the Fifth Army, sometimes with the Eighth Army, and saw action in many notable battles. These included the Third Battle of Monte Cassino, operations against the Gustav Line, and the Breakthroughs, operations against the Hitler Line, actions at Arezzo, and the occupation of Florence and Forlì. The regiment went on to serve in the Apennines against the Gothic Line and on to the final offensives of the Eighth Army in spring 1945. The end of the war found the 75th Medium Regiment in defensive positions facing Tito's Yugoslav army in Venezia Giulia. 76th Medium Regiment, after the conversion from horse cavalry to gunners in 1940. B and C squadrons formed the nucleus of the 76th Medium Regiment as 112 and 113 batteries, and were equipped with Great War 60-pounders, although these were later replaced by 6-in howitzers. For then, until 1942, the regiment was occupied in intensive training. On the 25th of August 1942, now equipped with 5.5-in howitzers, the unit sailed from Gorick-on-Clyde, also by way of Durban, to the Suez area, arriving in November. In January 1943, the regiment left Egypt and motored by way of the Sinai Desert along the Transjordan pipeline to Baghdad to join the Persia and Iraq force. In April, they moved to Syria and, through a shortage of guns in Tunisia, lost its own. In May, more guns arrived and combined operations with further intensive training were carried out in the Suez Canal area. They left the Middle East in December 1943 and landed at Taranto, Italy, by the 9th of December. 112 Battery had at this time 5.5-in howitzers and 113 Battery 4.5s, but shortly after landing, 112 lost its guns to another yeomanry regiment, receiving 4.5s in exchange. On the 15th of December 1943, the regiment moved up to the Sagro Battle and took over from its sister regiment in support of the Eighth Army. In February 1944, the regiment moved across to Cassino and took part in the battles of the 16th of February to the 15th of March and the successful capture and breakthrough of the 11th of May, and then on to the Hitler Line. The advance now went beyond Rome, with the regiment supporting the 6th South African Armoured Division up to and including the fight for Florence, except for the Arezzo battle with 6th Armoured Division. In April 1945, the regiment again moved across Italy to the east coast to join the final offensive with the 8th Army. After the German surrender on the 2nd of May 1945, the regiment saw further action on the road to Austria. On VE Day, it, like its sister regiment, was watching Tito near Trieste. Post-war, since 1947, the regiment has been equipped with tanks, armoured cars, scout cars and Land Rovers, whilst under command of the Royal Armoured Corps. In 1959, home headquarters of the 1st Queen's Dragoon Guards was established at RHQ in Shrewsbury, and the new regiment became associated with the Shropshire Yeomanry. From 1961 to 1967, the Pembroke Yeomanry was affiliated as a Sabre Squadron, and, in 1967, the Shropshire Royal Horse Artillery was amalgamated with the regiment, becoming a squadron. In 1969, the regiment was disbanded and replaced by No.4 Squadron, 35 Signal Regiment and the Shropshire Yeomanry Cadre. The cadre was then expanded in 1971 to form the Shropshire Yeomanry Squadron of the Mercian Yeomanry, with an infantry role in home defence. On the 25th of May 1973, Her Majesty the Queen approved the change of title to the Queen's Own Mercian Yeomanry, which, in turn, was amalgamated into the Royal Mercian and Lancastrian Yeomanry. 200 years and 21st century. Having celebrated its 200th anniversary in 1995, the Shropshire Yeomanry now survives as B Squadron of the Royal Mercian and Lancastrian Yeomanry. 95 Shropshire Yeomanry Signal Squadron was disbanded in 2009 due to the signal equipment becoming obsolete. Victoria Cross. The Victoria Cross is the highest and most prestigious award for gallantry in the face of the enemy that can be awarded to British and Commonwealth forces. The only Victoria Cross awarded to a member of Shropshire Regiment was won on the 10th of March 1918 by Private Harold Whitfield of the Shropshire Yeomanry, for gallantry at Burgh-el-Leeson during the Battle of Tel Asui in Palestine. Battle Honours. The Shropshire Yeomanry was awarded the following battle honours. Bibliography. Beck Major A.F. Order of Battle of Divisions Part 2A. The Territorial Force Mounted Divisions and the First Line Territorial Force Divisions. London, His Majesty's Stationery Office. ISBN 1-871167124-4. Beck Major A.F. Order of Battle of Divisions Part 2B. The Second Line Territorial Force Divisions with the Home Service Divisions and 74th and 75th Divisions. London, His Majesty's Stationery Office. ISBN 1-871167000. James Brigadier. British Regiments 1914–18. London, Samson Books Limited. ISBN 0-906304-032. Milam, Patrick. The Yeomanry Regiments, 200 Years of Tradition. Edinburgh, Canongate Academic. ISBN 1898410364. Rinaldi, Richard A. Order of Battle of the British Army 1914. Ravi Rikai. ISBN 9780977607280.